Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 4, Episode 8, The Opera. Yeah, that wasn't good. I'm so sorry I did that. I just, I read the word opera from my notes and I got an urge. And you know what? Sometimes urges are wrong, and that one was wrong. So I really apologize. Less than a minute in, and I'm attacking you with terrible opera singing. Sorry about that. I guess I did that too because I usually make some notes about banter, and I didn't make any notes this week because I really don't have a lot to talk about. A little boring. Well, okay. I guess I do have something to talk about, and it's the thing everyone is talking about, the slap, the big old slap by Will Smith on Chris Rock at the Oscars. Do we need more commentary? Probably not. All I can say is I've gone through weird phases of how I feel about it, from kind of being like, not cool, but whatevs, to like, he should never be allowed at the Oscars again, Will Smith. I'm not going to get super into it. And truth be told, this is my third attempt at recording because I've done 2 other takes where I've gone on. I mean, I looked at the timestamp. It was like 14 minutes in and I had rambled on about this stupid incident. So I'm not going to do that this time. All I'm going to say is that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote a beautiful article about, this incident. And, I will say that this whole week, I had my reaction. I was sort of in this holding pattern, like, I knew how I felt like the day after, but then I was like, I don't know how I feel. Am I feeling a certain way? Am I feeling like it's not that bad because of Will Smith's status, and I was struggling with that. Yeah, so I've gone, my feelings about it have run the gamut. But the one thing I can say is that I've sort of, I focused more on just reading think pieces and taking in, like listening really, like all these different takes on it. Because just as a viewer, I mean, it was shocking. It was pretty disappointing. But also, I will say that a lot of the think pieces and opinions that I'm reading are by people of color, and that I think that's important in this kind of an incident. And that's why I really enjoyed this article by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because his take is very, very much like Will Smith should be ashamed of himself. And, he writes so eloquently about how, hey, this wasn't just a slap on Chris Rock's face. It was really on the faces of so many people in the Black community who have made the progress that have allowed Will Smith to be on that stage. So anyway, it was just a really beautiful article. So I highly recommend reading that if you're at all interested in this. I know there are far more important things to talk about. So, and one of them is this episode. So let's get into it. Ooh, what a transition. Okay, so the synopsis for The Opera is as follows. Kramer gets tickets to the opera and invites Jerry, George, Susan, and Elaine to join him. Elaine breaks up with new beau Joey after Jerry tells her that he's really Crazy Joe Davola. Davola reacts by dressing as Pagliacci and seeking revenge on Jerry. George gets into a fight with an opera patron after trying to scalp his extra opera ticket. Wow. Almost everything about that synopsis is totally wrong. Who the hell is writing these? Elaine doesn't break up with Joey because she finds out he's Crazy Joe Davola. That happened before. Davola seeking revenge on Jerry has nothing to do with Elaine. It's about his deal with NBC. I mean, this is so many ways wrong. Whatever. I've said before, these synopses, it just definitely seems like maybe an intern at whatever company made the DVD set and didn't put a lot of effort. Anyway, this episode is written by Larry Charles. All right, we open, in Jerry's apartment, but we also first see Crazy Joe Davola on the phone. He's leaving a message for Jerry, a very haunting message. Basically, threatening Jerry that he's going to put the kibosh on him. He's kiboshed before, and he will kibosh again because he thinks Jerry messed up his deal at NBC. And he's not happy about it. So as that message is kind of wrapping up, Jerry enters his apartment. Kramer follows and asks if, come on, what do you think? The opera. Jerry doesn't really want to go. It's not his thing. Kramer says, fine, he won't go either. And Jerry's like, well, what about George and Susan and Elaine? Come on, I don't need to go. Jerry, you're the straw that stirs the drink. You're the mañana. And so fine, Jerry agrees. I sort of like that analogy. You're the straw that stirs the drink. Very, very complimentary to Jerry and his, role in the group. Elaine enters. She asks Kramer for the tickets and is very disappointed because Kramer doesn't have them yet. That's the whole reason she came over. She wanted to surprise Joey with them. Jerry's like, so I finally get to meet Joey. She's excited about this relationship. It's great to be involved with someone who's interested in something other than Nick at night. He's happy. He's well adjusted. Then we have these little cut to moments. We see Crazy Joe Davola crying and bench pressing with pictures of Elaine on the floor around him, listening to Pagliacci. And we're back to Jerry, and he's like, yeah, well, look, I'm looking forward to meeting him. Elaine has to go. She says she's going to just pop in on Joey. She's never been to his apartment. And Jerry's like, oh, yeah, men love that. And Jerry sees Kramer trying to read his mail at his desk, just holding it up to the lamp and grabs it away, blinds Kramer in the process because his face was about an inch away from the light bulb. And then Kramer notices that his message light is flashing on his answering machine. Ooh, could be that blonde. So he starts the message, and then we cut again to Crazy Joe Davola. He's just holding his hand above the flame of a candle and laughing hysterically. Back to Jerry. He's heard the message. He's freaking out. Oh, the kibosh. He wants to call the cops. Kramer says, sir, they can't do anything to him. And Jerry says, this is a big misunderstanding. I didn't ruin any deal at NBC. I didn't even know he had a deal at NBC. And so Kramer's like, well, just call him. Yeah, I'll call him. Yeah, he got the machine. How's his message? That's nice. So he starts leaving this message about this huge, colossal misunderstanding. The purpose of this scene, we are setting it all up. Opera and all the Crazy Joe Davola plot points. And my take. I like how they intercut the Crazy Joe Davola moments in the scene. It's been a couple of episodes since we've seen him. So instead of, being very dialogue heavy in regards to who he is to Jerry and Elaine, I think this was really effective to kind of cut back and forth. The Elaine portion of this scene was actually longer. It was deleted out. So I'll go over that right now instead of waiting for the extras portion of the podcast. So her conversation with Jerry was longer and a little bit more playful. And as the case is with most deleted scenes, it's not very good. I think it's good that they did cut it out. So basically, she tells him how she hasn't told Joey anything about Jerry, and he asks why. And she's like, well, what am I going to tell him about you? And Jerry jokes that, you could say how everything has gone downhill since she and Jerry were together. And her retort is, well, if you call that dung heap you're standing on a hill. And Jerry says, ooh, snappy repartee. I like it. It's bad. It's not great. There's no need. I think it might have been in there so that they can really establish they have no idea that this is the same guy. She hasn't told him anything about Jerry and all this stuff, but whatever. It still translates even without this terrible dialogue. And what it happens too is the final cut is a little bit disjointed. There's a big laugh when she goes, I gotta go. And that's because in the longer version of the scene, Jerry's trying to open a pickle jar and he can't get it. So she's like, hand it over to me. Come on, hand it over. And then so she tries, can't get it, and goes, I gotta go. And so that's why you hear this laugh that kind of comes out of nowhere in the aired version. So, but that being said, I do think cutting all that crap out was the right decision. Also, when she's leaving and Jerry makes the crack, oh yeah, men love that. When she says she's going to pop in on Joey, she leans in and says, when I do, they do, kind of seductively. Once again, not great. I do like her crack about the whole Nick at Night thing. A lot of her insults towards Jerry for the entirety of the series really is about how immature he is. And I really like that. I never get tired of it. All right, moving on to the next scene. We are at Crazy Joe Davola's apartment. And we hear the tail end of Jerry's message as we see Elaine walking up to the apartment, which doesn't, unless Crazy Joe Davola lives the next building over. I'm not sure that's really feasible, but I'll let that go. I do think it's a nice device to get us from one scene to the other, though. I like that. So she walks up and the door is wide open. She calls out for Joey, kind of taps on the door, looks around, and then sees a wall of photographs, and they are all photographs of her. So she walks in slowly. She's looking at all of them, and Joe comes out of his dark room and scares her. And she said, "Oh, you scared me." Good. Fear is our most primal emotion. You left your door open. I like to encourage intruders. Well, Elaine asks about the pictures. Do you like it? My home is a shrine to you. Oh, where'd you get them? I took them with my telephoto lens. And so there's all sorts of pictures, including ones of her showering. She's, of course, just horrified, very creeped out. And he invites her into his dark room because that's where he develops all these photos. The dark room? No, thank you. I'm a day person. I like that. She asks him if he feels all right. You don't seem yourself. Who am I? Who am I supposed to be? That's a good question. It's very existential. Who are you? Who am I? Well, makes reference to her, what I'm thinking is a naked shower shot. Then he asks about the opera tickets. He's really looking forward to it. Elaine makes the decision. She says, he couldn't get them. We aren't going. He's not happy about that. She needs to get out of there. She's got to go. Something is on somewhere, but he blocks the door with his forehead and asks her if she knows the story of Pagliacci, Netta. I'm Elaine. And so he kind of goes into how Netta cheated on Pagliacci and, do you think I'm a clown? Do I think you're a clown? No. I mean, if it's bad to be a clown, then you're not a clown. But if it's good to be a clown, well, then I'd have to rethink it. You've betrayed me with another. Tell me his name. Oh, man. He's just going more and more down a spiral of not being in reality. So she's really trying to get out of his apartment. And he even says, you're not going anywhere, puts his hand on the door and says how Pagliacci kills Netta. Oh, that's not very nice at all. She's rummaging through her purse, finally finds the Banaka and sprays him in the eyes, which allows her to escape. The purpose of this scene, we advance the Elaine plot with Crazy Joe Davola, and she discovers, he's not as well adjusted as she thought. My take, I've never really liked this scene. And it's not because it's a bad scene in and of itself. It doesn't ring very Seinfeldian to me. And I guess I should also confess that I am not a fan of the whole Crazy Joe Davola story arc. However many episodes he's in, I don't know how long he lasts in here, but this scene in particular, it's just not funny to me. And even though it ends with this triumphant moment for Elaine, it still just makes me so uncomfortable. And I know it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, but that's not why I watch Seinfeld. So I think that's why I really do not enjoy this scene being in a Seinfeld episode. That being said, JLD performs it to perfection. I find no flaw in the way she portrays Elaine here. She's trying to keep it light after discovering that this guy is creepy as hell and most likely dangerous. I mean, the way Julie Louis-Dreyfus keeps a level of nervous energy at the surface while also displaying a breeziness and trying to trick Crazy Joe Davola. This is why I love her so much. Her dialogue is trying to keep his anger at bay, but her energy shows just how freaked out she is. It's masterful. A word I totally overuse, but get over it. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. He is all ready for the opera, and Jerry's on the phone with the police, super annoyed that they won't do anything about Crazy Joe Davola. I mean, he's a comedian of the United States and under just as much pressure. He gets off the phone, there's a knock at the door, and it's George in a very ill-fitting tux. He says, "You locking the door now?" And yeah, Jerry says he's afraid of Joe Davola. Of course he is. Jerry sort of points out how skimpy George's tux is. And he says, well, the last time I wore it was 6 years ago. He did this awful cursed toast at a wedding. There were old people there. You were like a Red Fox record. No one even drank after the toast. And then George mentions how Susan isn't going because her friend is coming and she has to go pick her up from the airport. And George is out $100. And Jerry's like, well, why didn't she pay for her own ticket? That's a very good question. I just love a reach. When the bill comes, it's nice to get a reach. And we hear something at the door. Something hit the door, really. Jerry opens it. It's Kramer on the floor because, the door was locked. And Kramer walks in and Jerry's like, what are you wearing? He's just wearing a simple outfit with a cardigan. I mean, I have to say, it is a little bit dressed up, Kramer. Yeah, he doesn't dress up for the opera. Jerry doesn't want to wear a tux if he's wearing that, and George freaks out. Come on, I can't change. Anyway, they know Susan's not going, and then Elaine had called. Her friend's not going either, so they got 2 extra tickets. And Kramer says, hey, we can sell them. We could probably make $500 apiece. Well, of course, that excites George. And George and Kramer leave, and Jerry needs to wait for Elaine. And then we get a shot of Crazy Joe Davola putting on clown makeup. Next, we are in front of the opera house. Jerry is reacting to Elaine telling him that she sprayed him in the eyes with Banaka. Cherry Banaka. It's new. That annoys Jerry. See, I don't get that. They come out with the original flavor, and then a year later they come out with the cherry. They know we like the cherry, just release it at the same time. She's still bothered by it. She says it was like she didn't even know him, like a totally different person. Then Jerry mentions, well, you should hear the message from my nut. And then Jerry feels very vulnerable being outside. He wants to get inside, wants to get the tickets from George and Kramer, but they're waiting for them to sell their tickets. Jerry drops a quarter that he's been flipping. This other guy just picks it up, and he and Jerry get into this little tussle about, it's Jerry's quarter. No, it's not. It's my quarter. And they get this back and forth, to which I guess Jerry wins a little bit. And he feels like a tough guy in this opera crowd. He likes it. Then we cut to a shot of Crazy Joe Davola in the park, beating up a few punks who were taunting him. Purpose of this scene, we're just moving things along. We're getting closer to the convergence of the Crazy Joe Davola plots between Elaine and Jerry. My take, just real quick, I mean, it's okay. It's not the greatest scene, but I was disappointed to read in the notes about nothing that originally in this scene, in between, talking about Crazy Joe Davola spraying him with Banaka, Elaine was supposed to keep running into people she knew outside the opera house. But instead, they went with this quarter bit with Jerry, which I'm honestly not a fan of. I do like the part about Jerry feeling tough and opera crowd, but look, if there's an option to have more Elaine involvement, I'm all for it. I mean, they didn't really go into what that earlier version of the script entailed with Elaine running into people she knows. So I don't know what would have been funny about that, but I guess I just would have liked to see that. I mean, whenever we go like over a minute of Julie Louis-Dreyfus just reacting and not having any substantial contribution to a scene, that is very much wasted time. The quarter bit it was stupid. I would have rather seen something Elaine was actually involved in. Next, we're, I guess, on the side of the building where Kramer and George are trying to sell their tickets. Kramer kind of blows it with this one guy because he wants $1,000 for the deuce. The guy says $500 for the pair. George wants to take it. Still a profit. And the guy gets frustrated, says, bah, walks away. George is upset with Kramer. Kramer says, I know what I'm doing here. And then they just decide, you know what? We're going to each sell our own ticket. And moving back to the front of the opera house, Jerry and Elaine are still waiting. They're getting impatient. And then Jerry sees Mr. Reichman, who is a man who threw George out of the wedding, the one that they talked about with the curse toast. And Elaine remembers it. Jerry brings it back to Crazy Joe Davola. Can you believe that message? Now I have to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. And Elaine says she does too. And Jerry just says, Crazy Joe Davola. How'd you know his name? What do you mean? Why wouldn't I know his name? I never told you his name. I never told you his name. Wait a second. Who are we talking about? Joe Davola. Right, Joe Davola. How do you know his name? I've been out with him 3 times. I should know the man's name. Da, da, da. They realize, oh my God. And they're both talking about the same guy. And they start freaking out. Elaine says how he accused her of cheating with another man. He said, tell me his name. Tell me his name. Oh, Jerry's even more panicked now because if Joe sees him with her, then, oh my gosh, not only did he ruin the deal with NBC, but now he took his girl. Ah! Freaking out. And then a clown approaches them and says, excuse me, and they scream. The purpose of this scene, we see the dovetailing of the Crazy Joe Davola plots between Jerry and Elaine. My take, I really liked the writing in this scene, that realization moment between Jerry and Elaine, It's very naturally done. I think it's very believable. That's how they would come to that realization. And they both do a really good job acting in that moment. I like it. The freak out is always fun to watch. Okay, moving on. We are kind of going back and forth between George and Kramer selling their tickets, and then in the front of the opera house, George is talking to a man about the ticket, and he keeps upping the price. Yeah, it's Pavarotti. And then we see Mr. Reichman approach, and he overhears what's transpiring between George and this other man. He's appalled. He's appalled that the scalping is going on. And then he sees it's George and recognizes him as that foul-mouthed curse toast guy. So they get into it physically. And his wife says to be careful of his hair transplant. Now, the woman who plays the wife, Mrs. Reichman, she is an actress named Harriet S. Miller. And, well, among other things, there is a ba 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 boom ba dum boom 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 Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. Real quick, she played Mrs. Slutsky. That's right, Slutsky. What is this name? In a couple episodes of Gilmore Girls, she was sort of this grumpy old lady that lived next to Luke's diner. Anyway, so that is a connection there. I love her delivery of your hair transplant. Oh, funny. Then we see Jerry talking to the clown in front of the opera house, and the clown's asking for money. He's a street performer, but Jerry says, I don't have any change. I gave it to that guy, referring to the man who picked up his quarter. And the clown looks over. He's like, you know what? You don't have to humiliate me. Okay, I'm just a street performer trying to make a living. And Jerry's like, no, I'm serious. Then we see Mrs. Reichman crossing behind them, desperately looking for a doctor. Then the clown continues that, Jerry, what are you trying to impress your girlfriend? And then Elaine explains very calmly that, I'm not his girlfriend. We dated for a while, but things didn't work out. And the clown is just sickened by them. You people make me sick. The purpose of this scene, we introduce this little mini plot with Mr. Reichman, a callback to the cursed toast mentioned in the beginning. We also establish that there are a few guys who are dressed as Pagliacci, the sad, tragic clown. My take, there's very little I enjoy in these scenes. They're not terrible, they're not that great. And yet another instance where JLD is on screen but isn't given very much. The interaction with the clown is for Jerry to stretch out that whole incident with the quarter. Again, I'm just never a fan of Elaine just standing there and being an observer. I mean, you have Julia Louis-Dreyfus, for crying out loud. Use her. It makes me frustrated. The next scene, back to kind of the same setting. Kramer is, trying to sell his tickets. Pagliacci, get your Pagliacci here. And we see this clown approach very slowly. And we can tell as the audience it's Crazy Joe Davola. And he asks Kramer if he likes a circus. Kramer said, yeah, it was fun when he went as a kid. He was afraid of the clowns. You still afraid of clowns? Yeah. Back in front of the opera house, Elaine says they are going to miss the overture. Then Jerry goes into singing, overture, curtains, lights, blah, 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 doo-doo. I'm not going to sing the whole thing. I've already traumatized you with my singing this episode. And then Elaine points out after Jerry's done with his little performance that it's really pathetic that all his knowledge of high culture comes from Bugs Bunny cartoons. Then Crazy Joe Davola approaches them, but Jerry thinks it's that clown from before. Hey, look, pal, I don't have any money. That guy took it. And then this clown says, I don't want any money. Huh? Elaine smells cherry. The clown says it's Binaca. And then another clown starts singing Pagliacci. That's the clown that they saw earlier. Oh, and then they realize it's Crazy Joe Davola, and they run away. Back to George. He settles on $250 with this one guy for the ticket. But then he hears Susan calling for him. Oh, I'm so glad I caught you before going in. Turns out her friend's flight got canceled, so now she can go to the opera. And George turns to the man and slips the ticket in his pocket, takes the money. Oh, she sort of looks at him and says, oh, that's Harry Fong. He's an old friend of mine, a big opera buff. Well, Susan's ready to go in. And George starts with you know what? Jerry and Elaine, meanwhile, are begging to get in. They can't get in. They still don't have their tickets. They're telling the usher they just don't have them with them. Well, that's a problem. And to move out of the way so people with tickets can get through. But a crazy clown is trying to kill us. A crazy clown is after you. Oh, that's rich. Finally, Kramer arrives and they all get to go in. The purpose of this scene, we see the climax of the Crazy Joe Davola plots of fear with Jerry and Elaine. George and Kramer sell their tickets and George ends up getting out of the opera altogether. My take, I will admit, I've always enjoyed Jerry's little singing here. It's so cute and very silly. And here again, we have Elaine pointing out how immature he is with the whole comment about his knowledge being from Bugs Bunny cartoons. I like that whole moment. That's always fun. The Crazy Joe Davola approaching them, that's clever. I also think it's really unclear what happens after they run away from him. I don't think they ran a far distance, and yet he didn't pursue them or try and corner them. I don't know. It seems very odd to me that he just walks up to them, they realize it, they run away, and what is he, just still standing there? I don't know. It's a little confusing. I mean, I just think Crazy Joe Davola wouldn't just walk up to them and not do anything. A little bit flimsy of a plot point, I have to say. And then our last scene, we're in the theater. They're all settling into their seats. Jerry points out that the cast is great. Eva Martone. Elaine says, I've heard of her. Who is she playing? Netta. And that's when Elaine realizes, oh, that's what Crazy Joe Davola called her, Netta. A man kind of scooches in next to Jerry in George's seat. Then Susan arrives. Jerry asks where George is. And Susan says, oh, he went home. He said he wasn't comfortable. And Jerry asks Kramer who he sold his ticket to. Some nut in a clown suit. Uh-oh. Okay, so I guess maybe that's why Crazy Joe Davola didn't chase them, because he knew eventually he would be sitting next to them. The purpose of this scene, it's our resolution scene. And it's kind of meh. I mean, even the realization of the Netta thing with Elaine, it falls pretty flat. Not much to say, just kind of an average ending for me. All right, I am going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Oprah, Ellen, Montel, Rosie, Phil, Sally Jesse. The list goes on and on. Talk show hosts who, while achieving great success, totally ignored an entire community. A community stepped on by the big shoes of their oppressors. Their hearts and souls twisted into knots. Their abusers rubbing their noses with bigger, redder noses. The community who has suffered at the buzzer-laden hands of clowns. Well, now those victims have a voice thanks to the new talk show, Feel Better with Netta. Famously murdered by the sad, tragic clown Pagliacci in the opera of the same name, Netta brings to light the centuries-long suffering brought to us by clowns. Tell me, and take your time, what did Bozo do to you? Netta speaks from experience with her guests and helps them realize that they are not alone when it comes to clown cruelty. You can trust me. I know how you feel. Now, did Pennywise ever consider your feelings? On every episode of Feel Better with Netta, you will witness Netta's compassion and dedication to these victims, and they come out stronger and wiser. It is not your fault. Repeat after me. It is not your fault. You are a good person, and they were insane and a posse. Check your local listings for Feel Better with Netta. And be sure to tune in for a very special episode next month, when Netta comes face to face with Ronald McDonald. Can Ronald convince Netta that clowns can benefit the world? You'll have to tune in and find out. Feel Better with Netta. Send in the clowns, because Netta's waiting. And we're back. So the extras for this episode, there was an inside look and just a real quick little anecdote that JLD tells in the inside look. She actually met the real life Joe Davola, much like many of the names in the show. They were based on real people. And so JLD talks about being at some convention with Jerry, and a man walks up to her and he says, "Julia, I'm the real Joe Davola." She didn't really react too well and it kind of freaked her out. And then she says, I think a couple weeks later, he sent like a basket of muffins to her because she's pretty sure he could sense she didn't, really react to him too well. But even the basket of muffins didn't do the trick. She said she was still, quote, a bit flipped. Then a couple things in the notes about nothing. Originally, Elaine was supposed to knee Joe Davola in the nuts to escape. And later when she's describing it to Jerry, she says, and here's the weird part, he didn't react, which of course doesn't make sense. So if that's what she did to escape and he doesn't react, then how did she escape? So anyway, the cherry banaka, I think, worked a lot better. Moving on to Contributor Corner, Greg sent in some thoughts this week, and his first thought, I love Elaine's first scene discussing her new boyfriend as someone who is interested in more than just Nick at Night. I also love the way she dries her hands on Jerry's shirt. It's a dumb bit, but it gets a chuckle out of me. I like that too. It's, again, I talk about this a few times where they show the sort of intimacy of these friendships without it being said at all with dialogue. So that part does make me laugh too. And yeah, I love that Nick at Night line. It's so perfectly insulting to Jerry, and it's something he can't even, deny. I love it. Next, Greg says, when Elaine goes to Joey's apartment, I feel like this is the most genuinely suspenseful moment in the series. It makes me so uncomfortable because even though it's laced with lines of humor, the whole situation is very unsettling. The fact that he has been clearly stalking her, and his demeanor is so different than the guy she met on the street a couple of episodes ago. I do love the way she says, I'm a day person. It's so cheery, even though she's clearly freaked out. None of this would have happened if she wasn't such a fan of the Poppin'. Okay, Greg, are you victim blaming here? It's not her fault. He doesn't need to be a fucking psycho creep. I know you didn't mean it like that. Yeah, like I said, I've never been a fan of that scene. It's too dark for the series. Yeah, and like you say, it's laced with like comedic dialogue. And like I said, even though I'm not a fan of the scene, JLD really does elevate it and make it entertaining to watch. But just as a whole, I'm just not a fan of the entire Crazy Joe Davola storyline. And then also the scene in particular. It's just too dark for me. And lastly, Greg says, my favorite scene in this episode is when Elaine and Jerry discover that Elaine's Joey is Joe Davola. Their panicked realization and back and forth dialogue is so perfectly done by both of them. It feels as if they are truly terrified of this psychopath. Yes, I think that's my favorite moment of the episode as well. Like I said earlier, it's really well acted, and I like kind of naturally how it goes back and forth. Like who are you talking about? No, who are you talking about? It's really well done. And yeah, why wouldn't you be terrified of the psychopath? Holy crap. Thank you so much, Greg. And if you would like to become a contributor to Hot and Heavy, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com, elainepodcast@gmail.com. And I haven't gone over this in a couple episodes, but to be a contributor, really all it is I'll put you on a mailing list. I'll alert you to which episode I'm looking for comments on and when the deadline for those notes are due. And yeah, you just send them to me, either an audio recording or over email. Greg always sends them over email. They don't have to be super in depth, and it can even just be a question. It doesn't have to be a comment. You can be like, this has always puzzled me about this episode. Why do you think this happens? And I would be happy to give my thoughts. So, and the whole reason I have a contributor portion of this podcast is, look, I'm doing this solo. And the reason I'm doing it solo is, well, there are a few reasons. It was just hard to find someone who, could commit to doing this on a weekly basis. So just really for the ease of scheduling, I just decided, I'm kind of putting this off because I'm like, oh, I should have a couple of co-hosts or something. But I just really wanted to get started on this fun project. And the whole reason I want to have contributors is so that we can get different perspectives. Because you know what? These are just my opinions, and it's always great to get more opinions and more thoughts. So please consider becoming a contributor. I would love to have you. All right, my favorite Elaine moments. I do like the little moment, even though I don't like the scene as a whole, at Crazy Joe Davola's place when she's, again, trying to keep it a little bit light. And she talks about, oh, it's very existential. Who are you? Who am I? Well, and she kind of does this little motion to like an off-camera photo of her, which I think we're supposed to believe she's naked in the shower. I wish I had more to choose from. She acts so well in that entire scene, but I think my discomfort of that situation just kind of overtakes my ability to find favorite moments. And then after going over Greg's notes, I think maybe I could upgrade the moment with Jerry and just that realization of the Crazy Joe Davola thing. But I was just thinking, okay, when it's just Elaine, what did I like? And yeah, I think it's just that whole performance in that really uncomfortable scene, because I think JLD does such a great job with, that nervous energy. It's right there. You can tell it's in little things like, kind of swallowing and, it's all in these actions, but yet she's saying things that really just trying to keep this light. I think this guy's right on the edge. I better not say anything that's going to piss him off. She really just, shines in a scene that I don't like the scene, but I love her in it. And I think that is just a testament again to how talented JLD is. My final notes in this episode, as a whole, I don't love it. This really stems from my dislike of the Crazy Joe Davola character. I do like when the characters have, enemies or, foes or whatever. And in later seasons, when each character has a more comedic and less creepy or intense enemy, like the Banyas or the Sue Ellen Mishkes, the Lloyd Brons, I enjoy that more because, again, it keeps it less creepy. I just don't like Crazy Joe Davola. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is just so underutilized in this episode. It annoys me. Her plot with Crazy Joe Davola could have been a lot more of this episode. Even though I don't like him, I mean, that their interaction is pretty interesting. But instead, we just get way too many scenes with George and Kramer trying to sell their tickets, blah, blah, blah. Elaine scene swap. Ditch all that stupid Mr. Reichman and the cursed toast crap. Like, we spent so much time on this little plot that really went nowhere. And just give Elaine, more meat. So that's always what I want. Elaine, I just always want you to have more meat. That's the bottom line. And I think that's all I can say about the opera. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.